My mother's 65th birthday party had been my sister-in-law's project from the beginning. Diane had appointed herself the planner, the decorator, the hostess, and somehow also the final word on every guest list decision, every appetizer choice, and every seating arrangement. My mother, who had never been particularly good at saying no to forceful people, let her take over completely. I showed up at 2 in the afternoon with a chocolate layer cake I had spent the entire Saturday making from scratch, my 9-year-old daughter Sophie holding the door open with her hip, and my 6-year-old son James already running ahead toward the backyard where the other kids were playing. The house looked beautiful, I will give Diane that much. She had strung lights along the fence, arranged flowers in my mother's favorite pale blue vases, and printed a little banner that read "Happy Birthday Mom" in the curling font my mother loved. It looked like the kind of party that would end up in photos on someone's wall for years. I set the cake down in the kitchen and kissed my mother on the cheek. "You made that yourself?" my mother asked, lifting the edge of the cake cover and smiling the way she used to when I was small. "From scratch," I told her. "Cream cheese frosting. The way you like it." My brother Kevin came through from the back deck carrying a platter of corn. He squeezed my shoulder and said he was glad I made it. That was Kevin. Warm in the quiet moments, absent in the loud ones. He was a good man in most of the ways that mattered and had somehow spent 17 years married to a woman who was his precise opposite. Diane came into the kitchen a few minutes later with her clipboard, yes, an actual clipboard, and looked at my cake like it was a piece of furniture someone had left in the wrong room. "Oh, Claire. We already have dessert covered." Her caterer had done a 3-tiered lemon tart. She said it as though I had tracked mud across the floor. I told her to consider this a bonus, kept my voice pleasant, and went to find Sophie. The party moved into its middle hours the way family gatherings do, conversations crossing and looping, the kids running circuits between the backyard and the kitchen, my aunt cornering anyone who stood still long enough to hear about her new doctor. I held a glass of sparkling water and talked with my mother's neighbor about her garden and felt, for the most part, fine. I had learned over years to take these events in small doses, to find the people worth talking to and stay close to them. Then Diane's sister arrived. Her name was Patrice, and she and Diane together were a particular kind of weather system, warm to everyone they considered their equals and quietly devastating to anyone they had decided wasn't worth the courtesy. Patrice worked in wealth management and wore her job like a piece of jewelry. She had met me exactly 3 times in 6 years and each time greeted me with the particular smile of someone who had already categorized you and found you unremarkable. They settled in near the kitchen island, wine glasses in hand, and I might have stayed far enough away that it didn't matter. Except Sophie drifted back inside looking for a snack, and she stopped beside me just as Diane's voice lifted above the ambient noise of the party in the way voices do when someone has stopped monitoring their own volume. "She's been renting that same little apartment for 4 years now?" Diane was saying. "Kevin feels terrible about it, but honestly, what can you do? Some people just don't have the head for building a real life." She gestured vaguely in the direction of wherever she imagined I was. "Claire's always been like that. Sweet, but not exactly." She made a small sound that wasn't quite a laugh, "not exactly built for the real world." Patrice said something I couldn't fully hear. "Oh, completely," Diane said. "Kevin worries constantly. We've helped her out more than once. I'll leave it at that. She's the family charity case." Her words, not mine. Well, she lowered her voice a fraction, though not enough. Not mine out loud, anyway. Sophie had gone very still beside me. She was holding a small bunch of grapes she had pulled from the fruit tray, and she was looking at Diane with the expression children get when they are trying to understand something that doesn't make sense to them. "Mommy," she said quietly, "is a charity case bad?" The kitchen wasn't large. The question carried. Patrice looked over. Diane turned, and something moved across her face, not embarrassment, exactly. More like mild inconvenience. "Oh, Sophie, sweetheart. I was just talking about grown-up things." She smiled, the smile she reserved for children and people she was trying to move past quickly. Sophie looked up at me. Her eyes were asking me something she didn't have words for yet. I kept my face even. I said, "Let's go find Grandma," and I took her hand and walked her out to the back deck. James was chasing the neighbor's dog across the lawn. My mother was laughing at something my aunt had said. The lights Diane had strung along the fence caught the late afternoon gold of the sun, and it all looked so ordinary and lovely, and Sophie held my hand tighter than usual and didn't say anything for a while. Later, in the car on the way home, James fell asleep in his booster seat within 10 minutes the way he always did. Sophie sat looking out the window at the passing streetlights. "Is it true we don't have a real life?" she asked. "Who told you that?" Aunt Diane was saying it. "About you." She paused. "She said you're a charity case." I kept my eyes on the road. I told Sophie that some people measure a real life by certain things: the size of a house, the kind of car, the title on a business card, and that those people were not wrong exactly, just very limited. I told her that I had chosen to live the way we lived for reasons that were my own, and that our life was as real as any life I knew. "But are we okay?" Sophie asked. "Like, are we actually okay?" "We are more than okay," I told her. She didn't fully believe me. I could tell by the way she turned back to the window. That night, after both kids were asleep, I sat at my desk in the corner of the bedroom I used as a home office and opened my laptop. I have a folder I keep organized by property address. It is not a dramatic folder. It does not announce itself. It is labeled simply with a string of initials that would mean nothing to anyone who happened to open my computer. I scrolled to a file I had been meaning to review for 2 weeks. The address was 1140 Garland Street, Suite 4 and 6. That was where Diane's boutique operated, a women's clothing and lifestyle shop she had opened 5 years ago, the pride of her professional identity, the thing she mentioned in every conversation where professional identity was remotely relevant. She talked about it the way some people talk about their children, with a particular possessive warmth that didn't quite leave room for anyone else in the room. What Diane did not know, what no one in my family knew, was that I owned the building. I had bought it 3.5 years ago through a property holding company my attorney had helped me structure. The holding company had a name that communicated nothing about me. My property manager handled all tenant communications. When Diane signed her commercial lease, she signed it with a management company that processed paperwork and answered emails. She had never once asked who owned the building because it had never occurred to her that it might matter. The building at 1140 Garland was one of 7 commercial properties I held. My grandmother on my father's side had died when I was 26 and left me, unexpectedly and without telling anyone she planned to do it, the small duplex she had owned since 1987. I had rented it out and used that income carefully. I had spent the following 12 years reading everything I could find about real estate investment, about holding structures and depreciation and market cycles and tenant law. I had made cautious decisions and a few uncomfortable ones and several that turned out better than I deserved. By the time Sophie was born, I had a portfolio that I did not discuss with anyone, including my brother. It wasn't secrecy for its own sake. It was simply that money changes how people see you, and I had watched it change enough relationships to know that I preferred being seen as I actually was. The woman who brought the homemade cake. The one who drove a sensible car and rented a nice apartment in a neighborhood she liked. The family charity case. I had thought, in some back corner of my mind, that I would find the right moment eventually. That Kevin would figure it out when I helped him quietly through a difficult year, which I had, through a loan I described as being from a friend. That my mother would know without needing to know. That it would come out naturally, gradually, in the way that most true things do. Watching Sophie look out the car window at the streetlights had moved that timeline forward considerably. I picked up my phone and called my property manager. "Marcus," I said when he answered. "I need you to pull the lease file for 1140 Garland, Suite 4. And I need you to schedule a formal lease review meeting for early next week. The tenant needs to be informed that the property owner will be present." He was quiet for a moment. "Is everything all right with that tenant?" "The lease is fine," I said. "I just have some things I'd like to discuss in person." There was a pause. "You've never attended a meeting in person before." "I know. Things change." "I'll set it up for Monday," he said. 10 in the morning? "That works perfectly," I told him. I did not sleep particularly well that night. Not because I was anxious, exactly more because something I had been carrying for a long time had shifted, and that shift takes up a surprising amount of energy, even when it's a good shift. Monday arrived the way Mondays do, indifferently, full of traffic and the particular low-grade resistance of a week beginning. I dropped the kids at school and drove to the property management office, where Marcus met me in the lobby with a folder and an expression of careful professionalism that told me he had his questions but had decided not to ask them. We went into the car. I set my bag down and opened the folder and reviewed the lease terms while Marcus poured water. Diane arrived at 10:03. She came in wearing a camel coat and carrying the same energy she brought everywhere, proprietary, forward-moving, already composing her next sentence before the current one landed. She was followed by her business partner, a woman named Greta who handled the shop's operations and generally seemed more interested in actual business than Diane was. She saw Marcus first. Then she registered me. Something happened in her face that I had never seen before. A door closing very quickly. Claire. She said my name the way you say a word that suddenly looks like it's spelled wrong. What are you? Is Kevin? Kevin's fine, I said. Please sit down. She remained standing. Why are you here? Marcus opened his folder. Miss Diane, thank you for coming in. As you were informed, the property owner requested this meeting to discuss the lease for Suite 4 at 1140 Garland. Right, but Diane looked between us. Who's the property owner? Your company manages it. I've always dealt with. The owner of record for 1140 Garland Street is Meridian Property Holdings, Marcus said. Claire is the principal of Meridian. Greta looked at me. Her expression was neutral, professional. She was processing information. I found myself respecting her for it. Diane did not process information. She stared at me as though I had rearranged the furniture in a room she thought she knew completely. That's not, she started. You don't. Her voice had taken on a quality I had never heard in it before. Something unmoored. You own this building? I have owned it for 3.5 years, I said. But you. She sat down then, which I think she did involuntarily. You live in an apartment. You drive a Subaru. I like my apartment. I like my car. How? She stopped. She started again. How is that possible? I have been investing in real estate since I was 26. I kept it private because I prefer to keep financial matters private. I'm sure you understand. She did not understand. I could see that she did not understand, and that not understanding was a feeling entirely new and unwelcome to her. I opened my folder. The lease for Suite 4 is current. Your payments have been on time. Marcus and I have reviewed everything and the tenancy itself is in good standing. I am not here to change the lease terms. Diane blinked. Then why are you here? Because my daughter came home from my mother's birthday party and asked me if she had a real life. The conference room was very quiet. Marcus studied the surface of the table with the focused attention of a man who understood his role in this moment was to be furniture. Diane's mouth opened and then closed. She asked me, I continued, if we were actually okay. Because she had heard her aunt describe her mother as the family charity case. And she was 9 years old and she didn't know how to hold that. Claire, Diane began. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm not asking for an apology, though you should probably think about whether one is owed, and to whom. I'm here because I want you to understand something clearly. I have been polite and I have been quiet and I have allowed a version of me to exist in this family that is not accurate. And I let it exist because it was easier and because it didn't matter to me what people thought until it started to matter to my daughter. Greta was looking at her hands. I continued, the lease renews in 4 months. The building is appraised significantly higher than when you signed. Market rate for commercial space in this corridor has increased considerably. I have not raised your rent once in 3.5 years because you are family or adjacent to family and I believe in giving people room. I will continue to honor that. But I need you to understand the full picture of who you have been calling a charity case. Diane said nothing. She looked like someone who had walked into a building thinking they knew every room and discovered there was an entire floor they had never been told about. I have other properties, I said. I have a portfolio I have built carefully over 12 years. I have made decisions my family doesn't know about because they were my decisions to make. I am not saying this to impress you. I am saying it because my daughter needs to know her mother's real story. And you are part of why she was questioning it. I closed my folder. That is everything I came to say. Marcus will be in touch as the lease renewal approaches. I hope we can continue as we have been. I genuinely do. I picked up my bag. I said goodbye to Greta, who nodded with what I thought was the beginning of a real smile. I said goodbye to Diane, who looked like she was still waiting for the moment to make sense. In the elevator, Marcus exhaled. That was something, he said. Was it too much? I asked. He considered it honestly. No, he said. I think it was exactly enough. The call from Kevin came that evening while I was helping Sophie with a math worksheet at the kitchen table. I let it go to voicemail, finished the problem she was working on, made sure James had brushed his teeth, and then sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea and listened to the message. Diane told me about the meeting. He sounded careful and slightly stunned. She told me, Claire, why didn't you ever say anything? Call me back when you can. I called him back after 9, when the house was quiet. He answered on the first ring. I didn't say anything, I told him, because it was mine. Because I watched what happens when people know you have money. I watched it with Dad's family. I watched it with friends. I didn't want to be seen as the money. I wanted to be seen as me. He was quiet for a moment. You helped me 3 years ago. That loan from your friend. There was no friend, I said. He made a sound I couldn't quite categorize. Something between a laugh and something that wasn't. I'm not angry, I told him. I don't want you to feel like I was keeping score. I was just living my life. On my terms. Diane feels terrible, he said. She should think about Sophie, I said. That's really all I care about. Whatever she feels about me is secondary. Yeah. He was quiet again. She's different with you than I realized. I think I didn't want to see it clearly. I know. He told me he was sorry. He said it the way Kevin says things that matter, not elaborately, just directly, with his whole attention behind it. We stayed on the phone for a while after that, talking about nothing important. Our mother's party, the cake. How James had eaten an entire ear of corn by himself, which seemed impossible given the size of him. It was the easiest conversation we had had in longer than I could remember. The next morning, Sophie found me in the kitchen making lunches and sat up on the counter the way she had since she was small, legs swinging. Is Aunt Diane going to be weird now? She asked. I considered the question seriously. She knows something she didn't know before. I told her. That can make people weird for a little while. But I think she'll be okay. What does she know? Sophie, I said, I want to tell you something. I have been keeping a secret from most of the family, not because I was ashamed of it. Because it was mine, and I wanted to keep it mine. But you're old enough now to know. I told her about the properties. I kept it simple: the duplex from great-grandma, the careful saving, the decisions over years that had compounded into something real and quiet and solid. I told her about the building where Aunt Diane's shop was. I watched her face move through surprise, and then something more complicated, and then something that settled. You own where her store is, she said. I do. She considered this. Did you do that on purpose? Like to have power over her? No, I said. I did it because it was a good investment in a neighborhood I believed in. The rest of it just turned out to be connected. She was quiet for a moment, feet still swinging. Is that why you always tell me to save my birthday money? That is exactly why I always tell you to save your birthday money. She smiled at that, a small real smile that was not performing anything. She said, You're actually kind of interesting, Mom. I told her most people were, once you knew their real story. I put both their lunches in their bags. I drove them to school. I watched them go through the doors, James running, Sophie walking with the particular dignity of a 9-year-old who was working something out, and then I sat in the car for an extra moment before I pulled away. The following Sunday, I went to my mother's house for dinner. Just a regular Sunday, no occasion. My mother made her pot roast and set the table the way she always did. The good plates that weren't actually her best ones, but that she called her good ones, the candle she lit without lighting it all the way. Kevin and Diane were there. This was the first time I had seen Diane since the conference room. She was different in a way that was hard to name precisely. Not quieter, she was never going to be a quiet person, but more careful. She helped pass dishes without commentary. She asked Sophie about school and actually waited for the answer rather than nodding through it. When Sophie mentioned that she had been researching what a portfolio was, Diane looked at me briefly and then looked away and didn't say anything at all. After dinner, while the kids were in the other room and Kevin was washing up, Diane found me in the kitchen getting water. She stood near the counter and didn't immediately speak, which was unusual enough that I gave her the moment. I owe Sophie an apology, she said finally. And you one too. Sophie would appreciate it, I said. She paused. I was careless. She looked like she was choosing a word she didn't entirely love but that she'd decided was accurate. I made assumptions and I said things without thinking about who was listening, and I was wrong. She said it flatly, without theater. It was more convincing that way. I told her I accepted that. She said I also had no idea about any of it. I want you to know that. I didn't know and I feel like a fool. You shouldn't feel like a fool, I said. Most people don't announce these things. Why didn't you? She asked it like she actually wanted the answer. Because I value being known for who I am, not for what I have, I said. That's a choice I made a long time ago and I don't regret it, but it has a cost. People fill in blanks with what they see. That's just how people work. She nodded slowly. She said, I'd like to try to do better. If you'll let that be a possibility. I told her it was always a possibility. That was true. Sophie came in looking for dessert and found us standing together and assessed the situation with the particular attention children bring to adult scenes they suspect are important. Aunt Diane has something she'd like to say to you, I told her. Diane crouched down slightly, which I had not expected her to do, and she said, Sophie, I said something at Grandma's party that was unkind and untrue and you weren't supposed to hear it, but that doesn't make it okay. I'm sorry. Sophie considered her with the unsentimental clarity of someone who has not yet learned to be more careful with people than they deserve. It made me feel bad, Sophie said. About Mom. I know. I'm sorry about that. Your mom is. She paused, and I could see her finding the right word without reaching for something too easy. Your mom is remarkable. I should have understood that a long time ago. Sophie looked at me. I nodded once. She looked back at Diane. Okay, Sophie said. Thank you. Then she reached past both of us to get a piece of the cake I had brought. A simpler one this time, lemon with a plain glaze, and she took it to the other room without any further ceremony. I smiled. Diane straightened up and exhaled. That kid, she said, she's going to run something someday. Takes after her mother, Kevin said from the doorway. He had dried his hands and was leaning against the frame with the easy posture of a man whose two worlds have just imperfectly but genuinely started to get along. Dinner that night went long. My aunt told her doctor story, which we all knew, and nobody minded. My mother ate 2 pieces of cake and said mine was better than the caterer's, which Diane heard and which she handled admirably. James fell asleep against Kevin's arm on the sofa before 8. Sophie sat next to me and at some point quietly put her head on my shoulder without any particular reason, just because she felt like it. In the car on the way home, she was awake and thoughtful. Mom? Yes. When I grow up, can you teach me about the property stuff? Like, really teach me. Not just basics but the real things. I told her absolutely. I said we could start small, maybe a savings account she managed herself, then build from there. I said it took time and patience and a willingness to be boring in ways that paid off later. She was quiet for a moment. Is it okay if I'm also not boring? She asked. You can be absolutely anything, I told her. That's the whole point. She smiled in the dark of the back seat, that particular smile of someone who is beginning to understand that the world has more room in it than they were previously led to believe. At home, I carried James inside, got both kids settled, and then sat at my desk in the corner of the bedroom and opened my laptop. I looked at the property folder. I looked at the numbers that lived there, not dramatic numbers, not numbers that announced themselves loudly at parties, just steady and real and the result of many small decisions made well over many years. I opened a new document. At the top I typed, things I want Sophie to know. Then I started writing.